And I'll share my screen, and there we go. We can get started. My screen is visible, right? Please confirm so that I can get started.
Yes, it's visible.
Perfect.
Yeah.
So, general static preference project is we are provided with a prompt coming from a user, and our task is to assess two agent responses that we see for the prompt. So we are given with a prompt and two AI agent responses. And what we need to do is to assess and evaluate each response against three dimensions. Those dimensions are harmlessness, honesty, helpfulness. And the next step, after we evaluate each response against each dimension, we will be required to evaluate, to compare both responses overall, taking into account our judgment, our evaluation in dimensions. We will be required to give scores to each response to understand which response is preferred in overall dimension, kind of. Okay, this is the overview on the task, and I will now directly go to the dimension definitions so that we can understand what each of them means, and make sure that all the questions are clarified regarding each dimension. So we have harmlessness, we have honesty, and we have helpfulness. What does this mean? It means that ideally, we want the AI agents, the models, provide responses that are fully harmless, that are honest and truthful, and that are helpful to the user. This is ideal, right? This is the in ideal scenario. But our task is to assess the responses that we receive for the prompts and to understand how much harmless, how much honest, or how much helpful each response is. So by showing the model where it makes errors, we will help the model improve and become more harmless, more honest, and more helpful. When it comes to these three dimensions, please take into account that we have some kind of hierarchy here. Harmlessness has the highest priority. So if the response is harmful, then in overall we will say that the response is less preferred, no matter how honest or how helpful it is. Harmlessness has the largest share, like is the main decision maker, which response will be overall preferred, right? Then we have second priority, which is honesty and truthfulness, which has some share, and we have helpfulness. So I will go now one by one, discussing what a preferred and less preferred response is in each dimension. Let's start with harmlessness. So when we say that we expect the response should be harmless, it means that it should not provide any content that may consist of any kind of offensive or harmful content. There should be no offensive words or phrases or anything that may be harmful to the user. It should not reference any harmful topics. So whenever we see that the response covers, if so, we may have cases when the user is asking for such information, is seeking for something harmful, or is asking the agent to use harmful words, etc., right? Ideally, the response should never address such queries, such prompts, and should phrase its response in a way that is not harmful, even if the user is asking for that. Okay, so we should make sure that there is no offensive, no harmful content in the response. If there is, it will be considered as less preferred as opposed to one that is not harmful whatsoever. Harmful response is also considered the one that contains any stereotypes or biases be it positive or negative. If you feel that it has stereotypes or bias, you will consider it as harmful. Again, be it positive stereotype or negative stereotype, right? And please also regarding this section, when I say that there may be offensive content, please take into account that there may be cases when the agent is not using explicit offensive content, is not being direct, but instead is being harmful indirectly. So using sarcasm or different manners of speech. Uh, so you should use your best judgment as a human to understand whether this is really offensive or not. And even if it's offensive, but not explicitly, but kind of indirectly, you will again consider it as harmful. Um, and please take into account that whenever the user is asking for medical, food, or legal advice, food safety advice, the agent ideally should not provide any information on this. The agent is not eligible to provide such advice. So ideally, a response should have a disclaimer that, hey, I am not eligible to provide you with such information or advice. Please refer to this or these entities. This will be considered a preferred response. However, if the response goes ahead and provides with some kind of medical advice, for example, or legal advice, we will consider this response as harmful, because no matter if the response is giving accurate response, it's still harmful in a way that AI agent is nowhere to be providing. It does not have the right to be providing such information that may have potential harm to the user, right? So all these cases will be considered as harmful, and all the cases that don't have this will be considered as harmless. So when you are doing the dimension evaluation, you will have the several options. So I will do the following. After I discuss each dimension, I will show you it, the same in the platform as well, so that we can um, connect the dots here and in the platform, right? So here in the platform, before we go to dimension evaluation, please note that we have some prompts. Our task is to annotate the responses, right? Response annotation. We are not annotating the prompt per se, but we have cases when the prompts are not intelligible, hence we cannot annotate the responses. So what we did as the first question, we put whether the response, the query that we have is eligible or not. So here, what do we mean when we say it is eligible or not? We have cases when the prompt is in a foreign language. Any language that is not English is considered as foreign. It may be your native language. You may understand the language very well, but you will not consider the prompt as intelligible unless it's written in English. You may have cases that the prompt consists of foreign language partially and not entirely. Even in this case, you will consider it as unintelligible. And you will not proceed to response annotation. You will go to the next file. You may have a case where the prompt may be asking for translation, or it may be like, it may be written in English and it may say, answer me in Spanish. So you will consider all these cases as unintelligible because you will not be able to evaluate the responses that are not in English. So if I say the query is not intelligible, here I will be asked to select one of the reasons why I say that the prompt is not intelligible. The first case is foreign language that I discussed. The second case and this one are quite interconnected. Sometimes we may receive a prompt that sounds very gibberish and it makes no sense. It may consist of a word like why, or it may be something like, I know, right? or something that even as a human you have no context, it sounds gibberish, you don't know what it's saying. Hence, you cannot proceed to the response evaluation further. However, please take into account that you may have cases where you have the prompt, it's very vague, it's very unclear, but it still makes some sense. There may be no context, but you see that you can understand what it's talking about. So these cases should not be considered as unintelligible. You should proceed with annotation of these kind of prompts. And if it's unclear, if it's ambiguous, we have a special criteria to assess prompt ambiguity, responses addressing prompt ambiguity. So this is a completely different thing that I will address a bit later. And
So
this, yeah, please.
sorry if I'll be interject. You were saying that you're going to share on the platform. Are you?
Oh,
Yeah,
sorry,
you
I
don't
thought
share
you were
anything.
seeing
Yeah,
my screen. Thanks for letting me know. Yeah.
yeah, no
So
worries.
this is what I meant, everyone. Sorry. So here, this is the prompt evaluation section, and here I can say yes, it's intelligible, and proceed to the next step. And or I can say no, it's not intelligible,
Should
and the same
you, Sona,
is
should you be sharing your screen or?
Yeah, you're still not sharing anything on the screen, Sana.
on my end. It's showing that I'm sharing.
Yeah,
Oh,
for quite a while you haven't been sharing.
Let me stop sharing and reshare again, because on my end it was showing as if I was sharing.
mm-hmm.
Can you see it now?
I'm afraid not. Yeah, it's loading now. Yeah.
Yes, yes, working.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Wait,
So we have the prompt here, right?
I think
And
you
we
need to
have
go
the
to the
question.
start from the platform, the dashboard. I don't think anyone saw that.
So yeah, of course, if you mean this, so this will be the
Yeah,
view.
because I mean, just like your screen share was off for over 5 minutes, I think.
Yeah, so this is going to be the view, and you will see only the projects that you're onboarded on, and you will enter the project AGI SPR V2 annotation, and you will go to the specific file allocated to you directly, okay? And as a first step, you will be evaluating the query, the prompt, okay, to understand whether it's intelligible or not. So if we say no, it is not intelligible, as I mentioned, we have off-target cases, which are foreign language that I discussed. We have gibberish and queries out of context that I again discussed. And the last case is regarding coding. So whenever you have a prompt where the user is asking the agent to write a code, or is providing with the code and saying to review the code, such cases should be considered as unintelligible. But any general questions regarding coding or IT in general should still be considered as intelligible. So only coding itself is considered as unintelligible. Any other question, general question, or specific questions that are not coding itself will be considered as intelligible. Okay? Then you will select the reason here and go to the next file. However, in this case, we have an intelligible query. So I will say, yes, this query, this prompt is intelligible. And then I will need to answer a question. What type of question is it? Because we have two types of question. We have content generation and we have info seeking or factual. So whenever the user is asking, write me a story, write me an article, create this, do this, giving instructions for creation, it will be considered as content generation kind of response. And when the prompt is asking for a factual response, for example, what is the difference between this and that? What is the distance between this and that? That kind of questions will be factual, info seeking questions, and we will consider those as factual or info seeking. Let's say this is content generation and go to harmless dimension annotation that we discussed in the guidelines. So here in the view, you will have the description of harmlessness in general. You will have all the cases that are considered as more preferred, and you will have all the cases that should be considered as less preferred. So here, as you can see, all the cases that are listed in the guidelines are listed here as well. So you can either refer to the guidelines that are attached here. See, guidelines are always available, and you can click and you will be redirected to the guidelines to refer to any section that you need to clarify something in, or you can use this table here. And what do we have here? You have response 1, response 2 next to each other, and your task is to read the prompt, read each response thoroughly, and decide which response is less harmful given these criteria. So here you have several scenarios. First, you may say both responses are harmless. There is no offensive, no harmful content in any of them, neither implicit nor explicit. So I will say it's a tie, and it will automatically select almost the same, because when we say tie, tie means almost the same. Tie cannot have any other preference level. And we will go to the next evaluation. We won't need to select anything from here, okay? However, if I say response 1 is harmful and response 2 is completely harmless, I will say I prefer response 2, and I will need to decide how much better response 2 is against response 1. So in case of very, very slight and minor difference, we may say it's almost the same or slightly better. And in case the difference is quite major, I will say it's better or significantly better. This is already something that you should use your best judgment to decide which case it is. Please note that if you have one harmful response and one harmless response, the difference can never be slightly better or almost the same. It should be either better, or most frequently it will be significantly better. Okay? And once you make your selection here, you will be asked, why is the other response less preferred? So if I prefer response 2, I will need to say why response 1 is not preferred. And here we have some cases. It does not contain a disclaimer, or fully answers a sensitive topic, or repeats harmful. So different cases that will show that yes, this response is harmful because of this. You can select several ones here, whichever is related to the response, whichever is present in the response, you will need to check all the boxes that are relevant. However, you may have a third scenario where you have both responses are harmful. Okay, so we have one case when both are harmless, we have one case when one is harmful, one is harmless, and we have a second case when both responses are harmful. If they are equally harmful, everything is the same level, you will again say it's a tie, and you will say they're almost the same and no need to select anything from here. Okay, but if both responses are harmful, but one of them is explicitly very, very offensive, the other one is something very slight but still harmful, you will need to give preference to the one that is implicitly or less harmful. Okay, so for example, response 1 is explicitly harmful, response 2 is implicitly harmful. I will say I prefer response 2 because response 1 is, and I will say it's slightly better, right? Because both of them are harmful. I can't say significantly better, because significantly better or better are when we have harmful versus harmless, right? But when we have both responses as harmful, one of them is slightly better, or you can even say they are almost the same, depending on the situation that you have. And here again, you will need to check all the criteria that the less preferred response has. And once you are done with this one, please note that we have other here, because we although we try to incorporate all the cases of these ones here, you may have a case that is not listed here, so you can say other and write here what the other option is that is not listed here. But please make sure it's in the guidelines. You cannot put anything out of the guidelines, okay? Everything should be according to the guidelines. So if I see, it's automatically changing to almost the same. This was the harmlessness section. Before I go to honesty, please let me know if you have any questions regarding harmlessness dimension. Please go ahead if you have any questions.
Yes, please. What if the reason that I would like to write is like new to the guideline? It's like something
No,
that I
no, we can't invent something out of guidelines, okay? We have the guidelines and we should follow the guidelines. If guideline is saying this is harmful, this is not harmful, we should follow that. We can't say, what if this is harmful for me? No, there is criteria given in the guidelines and we should follow that. Okay,
All right, I got it. Thank you.
sure. Any other questions, or else I will proceed to,
Hi,
yeah,
can you hear
please.
me? Hi.
Yes.
Sorry, I wanted to ask you about you just said if both of them are harmful, we're gonna say that we're gonna pick the one that's less harmful than the other. That's right? Did I
Yes,
understand?
we
Okay.
still need to compare. So the idea is that we don't want to overuse the Thai
Yeah, that's
selection,
what
okay?
I was thinking. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. So even if they are both harmless, or even if they are both harmful,
Okay.
we are required to still analyze and decide
Mm.
if there is some kind of difference. And even if both responses are harmless, but one has very, very slight, although in case of harmlessness it's not applicable, it's mostly applicable for honesty and helpfulness when there may be something slight, you should always select it, and you can say I prefer response to, and say they are almost the same or slightly better, okay? But at least you will show that this one is different from the other one. When you say Thai, it means they are absolutely the same.
Oh yeah, yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Sure.
So now we have one question on the
Yeah.
chat. So, what if someone asking, write an article about the advantages of solar energy? Can we consider it as a content creation or fact seeking?
Yes, please take into account that this is a great question. We have cases when, just like the one we have, it's asking content generation, which also should have factual credibility in it. So it's a mixture, but we will prioritize content generation. So this one is content generation with factual, right? But it is content generation, first of all. In other cases, we may have purely factual response, but whenever we have either purely content generation or content generation and factual, we'll consider it as content generation.
Sona, sorry, I wanted to ask about something else. You were saying that if it's coding, then we're gonna say that it's intelligible, the prompt itself. But is coding
Fine.
considered like a link of something? Like it says the prompt says, okay, this is the link. I want you to explain more about it. So this is not this is considered intelligible, right?
Yes, yes. It's not coding. It has nothing to do with coding itself. It's just providing a link. And what you will need to do as an
Hmm.
annotator, you will need to go through that link and make sure that the responses are actually using
Okay.
the link accurately.
Okay,
So
I see.
definitely intelligible. Yes,
Okay, thank you.
sure. Thanks for questions. I will proceed to honesty. The next one, honesty and truthfulness. What we would focus on in this dimension is the factual accuracy of the responses. This is going to be mostly applied for factual questions whenever we have facts incorporated in the response, be it purely factual or content generation with facts. Our task will be to search on the web and make sure that the facts provided in the response are accurate. Please take into account that you may have very long responses, and in order for you to be able to do your fact checking more efficiently, what you need to do is focus on the core question coming from the prompt. If the prompt is asking one question, but in the response you have very elaborate description of with additional information, you can check only the core questions factual accuracy. Okay, if it's accurate, you can consider the full response as accurate. Okay, if the prompt has several questions, several factual questions, then you need to check each one separately to make sure that each fact is accurately provided in the response. Okay, so that this way you will understand, and please, when you are doing the fact checking, make sure to use credible resources. Like, do not consider, for example, a Facebook post or any other social media post to be credible resource, right? Make sure to use credible resources for fact checking. And obviously for content generation type of purely content generation type of responses, you will not be required to do any fact checking. For content generation, the only thing that you need to do is to make sure that the response has not been plagiarized. So for both factual and content generation kind of responses, you need to use a tool that we provided here in our global rules section. Here we provided you with a tool that you can use to check whether the response has been plagiarized or not. What do we mean when we say the response has been plagiarized? Please take into account that there may be some very common expressions in the response that everyone could use in their daily speech. Such expressions, such sentences should not be considered as plagiarized. Here you
Hello. Hello. Can anyone hear me?
Suna, I think you
Hello?
lost the network.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
now yeah. Okay. Your screen was like frozen for a couple of seconds, but now you're back.
Okay. I was not doing anything either way. I was just here. I didn't change anything.
Okay. Yeah, yeah. Okay. Now you're back.
So I was saying that for plagiarism, please always use the tool, but base your judgment, base your decision on your judgment. Do not fully trust the tool because it may highlight things that are not really plagiarized. Or it may say Paris is the capital of France. It may be highlighted as plagiarized, but obviously it's something that everyone would say as a response, right? So you won't consider it as plagiarized. However, if you find something that is showing as 100% copy pasted, you will consider this as plagiarized. Please note that we do not have any threshold. If you have a response of 10 lines and only 2 lines have been plagiarized, you will still consider the full response as plagiarized. Okay, so even if the full response is not plagiarized, but only some portion of it has been plagiarized, you will still consider the response as plagiarized. So this is what the honesty of content generation type of response will be based. Okay, and for we have 2 more cases. A preferred response: whenever you are provided with a link in the prompt, you should make sure that the responses accurately use the link, and whenever there are some resources mentioned in the response, you should make sure that these resources are credible ones. So this is all you need to do for honesty, and it's mostly for factual kind of responses. For content generation, it will be mostly checking plagiarism. However, you may have a prompt asking for something like, write me a story consisting of 5 lines. And you may have 2 responses. One response may provide you a story of 6 lines without saying anything. And you may have response 2, which will say, of course, here is your response of 5 lines, and then provide a story of 6 lines. So in both responses, we have story of 6 lines, although the prompt was asking for 5 lines, right? However, in honesty, we will consider the first response as honest because it's not lying to the user, it's not providing with this information. The fact that it's writing a story of 6 lines as opposed to 5 lines, we will consider it in the section of helpfulness. I will discuss this a bit later. So we will consider response 1 as honest, if it's not plagiarized, of course. However, in response 2, although it's content generation, we will consider it as not honest, as less preferred, because it's providing the user with this information, saying, of course, here is your story of 5 lines, right? It's saying, I'm giving you a story of 5 lines, and at the same time, it gives a story of 6 lines. So in this case, we will say this response is not truthful, and we will give it this less preferred selection. Although both responses have story of 6 lines, one of them is honest because it doesn't lie to the user, kind of, and the other one is lying to the user, so we will consider that one as less preferred. Apart from plagiarism, please take into account that whenever you have cases that the response is leaving out facts compared to the preferred response, you will consider this as less preferred. However, there is something that you shouldn't be confusing this with. You may have a question that is asking for something specific, and you may have 2 responses. One is a very short response, the other one is a very long response, but both of them accurately respond to the core question. So the core question coming from the user have been answered accurately in both responses. So as long as both of them are accurate, in honesty section, you will consider them both as equally honest. You will not say the longer one is more honest and the first one, the short one, leaves out facts. It doesn't leave out facts that are addressing to the question, right? The question has been answered. However, when you go to helpfulness, I will show this later. When you go to helpfulness, you will say, although they are both equally honest, response 2 provides the user with more relevant information, additional relevant information. So when it comes to helpfulness, this response is more helpful, although they are, again, equally honest, okay? So do not confuse the leaving out facts with providing with more information, because unless the user is asking, provide me with additional information on this topic. If that's the case, then you will consider the one with more relevant information as the more honest one. Okay? Is this clear?
Yeah, I think. But Sana, can you check chat? There's a few good questions, I think.
Let me see.
Like the three last ones.
Okay, if it's a question info, I think we have several ones. If prompt is a question, then it's info seeking. If it also asks to write, okay, we have. What if we ask, give me an example of Shakespeare's Hamlet text? Yes, that's a great question. In honesty, you will consider it as plagiarized, but in helpfulness, you will consider it as helpful because the user asked for something and the agent fulfilled the ask. So it will be not honest, it will be plagiarized, because the user is asking for it, right? But it's still plagiarized. And in helpfulness, you will say this response, although it's not honest, it's helpful because the user asked for something and the agent fulfilled it. Yes, please check for plagiarism for each response. When you activate the tool, it will be easy for you to check the responses. If response 1 is plagiarized, response 2 is not plagiarized, obviously response 2 will be more preferred. So plagiarism is considered as less preferred response. Okay?
I have a
Yes,
question, please.
yes, please.
Is in this case considered the extracted text, Shakespeare novel? So it wouldn't be considered plagiarized, as in page 27 in the materials. It says if it doesn't request something copy pasted or extracted, rate it as 3. In this case, it would be extracted, right?
It means like, please can you quote me some Shakespeare? Then it's like, is it still plagiarism when it's asked to quote something from a material that it's already existing?
Yes, I see. So let me share my screen here. Do you see this? This is what you mean, right?
Page 27.
If the response contains plagiarized content when the prompt doesn't request. Yes, that's true.
In this case, it requests extracted. It says,
yes,
give me a chapter for something. So it won't be plagiarized, right?
Yes, that's a great point. Thanks for highlighting this.
Okay. So it will be helpful and
honest. Yes, helpful.
Thank you.
Yeah. So yes, this was regarding honesty, and I would like to share my screen to show you what it's going to look like in the platform. Again, you will have the question, and again, you will have notes on most preferred and less preferred criteria here that you can hide or unhide always. And similarly, you have the responses here, and the same goes here as well. So you, just like harmlessness I explained, you may have both responses honest, both responses not honest, one honest. So 3 cases are always similar, right? So if it's a tie, it can be both responses are honest or both responses are equally dishonest, right? And if I prefer one response over the other, I would always need to make a selection here to decide how much preferred the response to is. And then I will need to check here, if I said that I don't prefer response 1, why don't I prefer response 1? Because it contains this information, or it is factually inaccurate, right? So I will make all the selections. And again, if there is something that is not listed here but is in the guidelines, you can always select other and put your comment here. Do we have any questions regarding the UI part of the honesty?
No, for the time being, thank you so much.
Thank you. Then we will go to the, we have a question?
Yeah, we have a question from Lumira. I see you raising your hand. Go ahead.
I can
The
hear a question.
Is like, can we use Quora for fact checking?
I would say no. Like whatever your it may be Google or whatever your search engine is, you can ask your question there, and whenever you are provided with a list of results, you can select the most relevant and the most trustworthy platforms from there. Ideally, I would say don't use any social kind of coming from users, right? Not necessarily credible, right? So no, please do not consider these as trustworthy and credible. The fact checking, you can consider it Wikipedia or similar platforms. Okay, next one we have helpfulness. When we say a response should be helpful, we mean that a preferred response would have no spelling, grammar, or punctuation errors. Whenever you have any of these errors, you will give less preference to that one. Please note that for this one as well, we have provided you with a tool here, an extension that you will need to use to do this grammar and spelling checking. Once you activate it, it will highlight all the errors present in the data that you're reading. However, sometimes, just like plagiarism tool, it may give you provide you with false positive. Please note that you should not be considering false positives whenever you may have some terms coming from some specific fields or domain. So instead of going ahead and saying, yes, this is a wrong spelling for this word, whenever you're not sure, always use web search to see if this word is indeed correctly or incorrectly written or not. Okay, so but mostly the tool must be helping you in that aspect. Okay. Additionally, whenever it comes to helpfulness, especially this is going to be applicable for content generation mostly. Whenever you have a request coming from the user in the prompt, if the response is covering that request, then you will consider it as helpful. Just like the example that I shared previously. If the user is saying, write me a story of 5 lines, and if I write a story of 5 lines, I will consider that response as helpful. But if the response provides with a story of 6 lines, I will consider this, no, this is not helpful because the user is asking for something and the agent is not fulfilling the instructions coming from the user. So in our case here, if I share my tab here, you can see that our user has a number of criteria, right? Write a 1,000-word article. This is one criteria. Engaging style, another criteria. Include subheadings. This is another criteria. Include statistical data, credible sources. So see how many criteria are coming from the user. So what we need to follow when it comes to helpfulness is to make sure that all these requirements have been met. If all the requirements coming from the user have been met, we will see this response is helpful. However, if at least one of the responses of the requirements is not met, we will say, okay, I prefer this response less. So let's say you have only one requirement in the prompt and you have 2 responses. Response 1 fulfills the requirement, response 2 does not. Obviously, you will prefer response 1, right? But you may have 5 requirements in the prompt. Response 1 may fulfill all 5. Response 2 may fulfill only 3. Again, you will or 4. You will prefer response 1 because it fulfills all prompt requirements. Or you may have a case where response 1 fulfills 4 requirements, response 2 fulfills only 2 requirements. You will again prefer response 1, although it's not fully helpful either. It's more helpful than the other one because it meets more requirements, right? So this is what you should pay attention to when it comes to these criteria, that answers, fulfills, or otherwise completely satisfy the prompt's instructions. And whenever we have a sensitive topic discussion coming from the prompt, I'm sorry, ideally a response should deflect and should not answer to the question or provide any information or proceed to any communication when it comes to sensitive topics. However, you will have cases when the response will not deflect and will go ahead and discuss sensitive topics. You know, it may be the user may ask something about suicide, and the prompt, instead of deflecting, it may start talking about the topic, right? While it should deflect, saying that I'm an AI agent, I cannot, etc., etc. So we'll consider this as not helpful. So this will be, if you remember, as also, if it's harmful, you will also consider it as harmful. And if in helpfulness, you will also consider this part. However, if the response is deflecting, so this is kind of controversy. The user is asking for something, some information, and ideally we say, if the prompt is addressing all the requirements, then it's helpful, right? But here we say the opposite. If it's something sensitive, and the prompt and the agent is answering to that, fulfilling that request, in that case, it's not helpful. In that case, it's the other way around. Another thing that we should pay attention to when it comes to helpfulness is we should make sure that the response matches the human tone or persona. For example, the user may ask, write me a children's story. Then we should make sure that the response provides indeed with a children's story, not an adult story, right? Or if the user is saying, respond to this question in a sarcastic way, then we should make sure that the response indeed matches the user tone, right? And another thing that we should consider within helpfulness is how comprehensive the response is. So there may be cases when the response is unfinished, it's cut off in the middle. Such responses will be considered as less preferred as opposed to the ones that are finished and are comprehensive. Also, when it comes to comprehensiveness, there is another case. Remember, when talking about honesty, I mentioned that there may be cases when the response is providing with additional information, right? So we won't be considering it in the dimension of honesty. Instead, we will say, if both responses are addressing the honesty, okay, it's okay. But if I have one response providing with more relevant information than the other one, I will consider that one as more helpful, okay? So in helpfulness, I will give this difference because it's more comprehensive. And I will say the shorter response could have been more comprehensive. However, please take into account that sometimes the longer response, the additional information may be completely irrelevant. And in this case, you will not consider it as more helpful or more honest either, right? Because if you have additional information, but it doesn't do any good to the user, then why would I consider it as more helpful? Okay. Then I will say that it provides with unnecessary information instead of necessary ones, right? And the last case regarding helpfulness is remember when discussing the prompt, I was saying that we should not confuse gibberish and out of context out of context gibberish prompts with ambiguous or unclear prompts. So whenever the prompt is not clear, whenever it's either unfinished or there is something that there's some information missing, ideally the response should ask for clarification. So instead of going ahead and making assumptions, coming up with assumptions, ideally the response should ask, can you please clarify, or something like that. This will be considered as a more helpful response, as opposed to another response that instead of asking, can you please clarify what you mean by saying this, for example, it may come up with assumptions which may or may not be helpful, but we don't want to risk it, right? We don't care if it may be helpful. What we are concerned with is that we want to be sure of that it is helpful, not be confused about it, right? So whenever it comes up with assumptions, we'll say it's less helpful. This is for helpfulness, and I want to show you the same on the platform. Okay, just checking here. And again, similar to the previous ones, we have criteria here, all the description here, the same here. And please note that whenever you have such requirements, you can always refer to the word count here. So all the responses will have word count. So whenever you in the prompt you have some limitation or requirement, you can address to the word count here to decide whether that requirement has been met or not. Okay, so this is one thing. And just similar to the previous steps, you will do either a tie or response 1 or response 2. You will decide how much you prefer one response over the other one, and you will provide with explanation as to why you prefer the other response compared to that one. Do we have any questions on the helpfulness?
Yeah, I have a question, please.
Yes, please go ahead.
If the prompt asks to write a story or generate a story about 5 lines, okay?
Mm-hmm.
And the response was actually a 5-line story. So
Mm-hmm.
we mark it at helpful.
Yes.
But what about the honestless section? The story doesn't contain any information to
Yes,
choose if it's honest
that's
or
what I
not.
meant when I was discussing honesty. Whenever we have content generation, a pure content generation without any facts to be checked, the only thing that you need to check for honesty is plagiarism. If it's plagiarized, it's not honest. If it's not plagiarized, it's honest. That's it. That's all you need to do.
Okay, I got it.
Mhm.
Hey, Sana, sorry. So we're saying that it's the honesty. Sorry, the helpfulness. One is basically on the zero spelling and grammar or punctuation errors, so on. But also we need to make sure that it's helpful for the person reading. So if one is not there, if there's something wrong with it, if the grammar is wrong, but it's helpful, what should I do?
No, if any of these criteria is not met, it's already unhelpful. Like it's like, see, we have all these cases.
Yeah.
Any of these errors will mean that this response is not helpful. You don't need to have all the errors. Even
Okay.
one of them.
Okay. Okay. I
But
see.
this response is not helpful. This response is not honest. This response is not harmless. Okay.
Yeah.
And the more criteria you have from here, the
Mhm.
less preferred it will be. Okay, you may have one response with one criteria from here, another one with 3, and obviously you will prefer the one that only has one only, right?
Mhm. Okay. And also, I wanted to talk about the topics that are not allowed to be discussed, like you said, suicide and so on. Isn't that gonna be like not okay with harmless? Harmless. It's gonna be a harmless
Yes, exactly. That's
response, not
what I
helpful.
mentioned. That such responses will also be discussed in here. See.
Okay.
Wait, let me find that. Response in a way that could lead to physical, emotional, or mental harm.
Okay.
Most sensitive topics have this quality, kind of, right? So apart from being not helpful, they are also harmful. So they're harmful and not helpful. So the same thing will be addressed in both dimensions. So here, see, does not contain a disclaimer for sensitive topics, etc. So the same, if you have the issue, you should address it both in harmlessness and helpfulness. Okay, if we have no further questions, I want to go to the final section of overall evaluation of responses. So here, sorry, we have a question.
Yes, yes, please.
Please go ahead.
So when we start our evaluation or assessment to the two responses, we put in our consideration that the first priority will be if is it harmful or not, and then if is it has a honesty, or and at the last one it will be helpful or not.
Yes, exactly. So one important thing that you should keep in mind is that although dimension evaluation and overall evaluation are separate steps, they are still interconnected. You cannot say something in dimension evaluation and say something else in overall evaluation. Or sometimes at the very beginning of the project production, we realized that the users would say Thai in dimension evaluation, and in overall, they would give preference to something else, like and they would say, because this is more honest, because this is more helpful. And we would be like, okay, if you say this is more helpful, why didn't you put it in the dimension evaluation? So these are very interrelated, and you should make sure that whatever decision you make in dimension evaluation will have an effect on your overall scoring. They should reflect the same the same qualities. Yes, we have a question. Please go ahead with the questions.
Yeah, I do have a question. What if a task was dropped in harmless, do you think that we should work on it, actually, on honesty or something like that? Or
Yes,
once,
you still need to annotate all three dimensions. So it may be harmful, but it may be fully honest. You still need to annotate the honesty and helpfulness. You can't say, okay, if it's harmful, I don't need to annotate the rest. No, any of the steps must be accordingly annotated. None of the steps can be skipped.
I got it. Thank you.
Sure. To fulfill requirements and provide good info. No. Still, please take consider this. You are comparing responses within a dimension. They may have errors, but they may have different errors, right? Just like you gave here. One of them may have plagiarism issue. The other one may have info, like disinformation. So you may have response one where you have very good response, but it's plagiarized. We're talking about honesty. It's plagiarized, but everything is accurate, but it's been plagiarized. And you have response two where there is no plagiarism, but you have misinformation. The facts are not accurate. So both responses will be considered as dishonest. Neither one of them will be honest, and you can say, based on the level of disinformation and response to, I would say you can say it's a tie. Okay. And when giving responses, for example, plagiarized response automatically receives a score of 3, unless it's deducted for other criteria, right? And if you have wrong, inaccurate information as well, here we should have that here. Let me find that. Here, false information is again 3. So see, it's a tie because both responses would receive the same score. And although they have different errors, they still both are dishonest and they still both will receive low scores. Does this answer your question? Okay, perfect. Then please let me show you the scaling table, quality score table quickly so that we can go through this on the guideline, on the UI as well. So have scores from 1 to 7 that we should assign to each response. But before doing that, what we do in the UI is we are doing a response annotation for overall. And here we will say you have response 1 and you have different criteria which will be the decision makers of your final response. If you say this response contains plagiarized content, it will automatically be a 3. If you say this is relevant, comprehensive, has a correct tone, it's a perfect response, it will be a 7. If you said in the previous steps that it's toxic, you cannot say here it's not toxic. So whatever you said previously, you should make sure that it's reflected here as well. Okay. So I don't really remember what I selected in the previous one. Let's go and see what we said for response 1. Hi. So for honesty, we said is factually inaccurate. And for helpfulness, we said, okay, let's be logical here. And if I come here, if I said that it's false information, if I said it there, I should make sure that I have that case here as well. If I said contains spelling errors there, I should make it clear here as well. Here I will need to decide whether it's a major grammar or spelling error or minor. If it's major or minor, accordingly my scores would be deducted. But I can say it is still comprehensive, or it has a correct tone, or is relevant. Okay, all this can be selected. So we have both positive and negative cases that will be the decision makers. So this comes from the ranking table that I showed you. And you will do the very same for response 2. You will say it is relevant, is comprehensive, has a correct tone. This is a perfect response, let's say. And here you will have the table with all the criteria here as well. So this will make your work so much easier. Why? Because you have all the cases listed here. If this is the case, this is the score. If this is the case, this is the score. So it will be easier for you to decide what score to give. Please take into account that the more cases you have, the more scores will be deducted. So at first you may say, okay, it could be more comprehensive, so it's not a 7. Let's start for 6. But then you realize, wait, it has some spelling errors. Then it goes down to 4. And then you're like, oh, wait, it's harmful, as a matter of fact. And then it will go down to 1. Okay. So these are helping you to decide what score can be the maximum for the given scenario, not the final score. The final score will be up to you. However, in this final section, what you will see, you will have the dimension evaluation results that you did. And when you come here, based on the checkbox selection that we did in the previous steps, we are provided with pre-generated scores. These pre-generated scores are coming from automation that are taking all the selections that you made in the previous steps, and based on the guideline requirements, they are deciding which score this should be. However, you should not trust this selection blindly. Although we believe it's doing the work accurately, you should always double check and make sure that yes, this is the correct selection for this case. So if you agree that yes, this should be a 3, this should be a 7, and it's auto-generated here as well, if you completely agree with this, you say complete and go to the next file. However, if you feel that the calculation was done, pre-generated result is wrong, you can change, and you see the change is reflected here, and you will be required to leave a comment as to why you changed the score. And you can't say something very subjective or something very general. You should say something coming from the guidelines. So you should say, because this is the case, for example, this response can't be a 7, but should be a 6, for example. And then after give clarification, you can complete the file. For this, apart from this ranking table, what will be very helpful for you is these global rules that some of them are automated. The rest you should use while doing the annotation. Please make sure to thoroughly check these global rules, as well as overall preference decision section and the ranking quality score table section. All of these are going to make your work so much easier once you understand exactly in which case what needs to be done. At first, for the first few files, you will need to double check with the guidelines all the time. But once you get the hang of it, it will be so much easier, because you'll be like, oh, in this case, this was the rule. In this case, this was the rule, because we have rules. If this is the case, this is the score. If this is the case, this is the score. So it's a clear cut, and it will make your annotation process very much easier, okay? Please make sure to read all of this very, very thoroughly. That is it for now regarding the guidelines and the platform. Before I go ahead and discuss the next steps, please let me know if you have any questions regarding anything that we just discussed. Okay, if everything is clear, which is good to hear, then I will just tell you what the next steps are going to be, and we can take it from there. So after the call, we're going to send you the recording so that you can use it as a reference. And we are going to onboard you on production of where you need to complete only 5 files. Please note that no more than 5 files should be completed by each user. So the reason we're doing this, we need to evaluate your annotation quality. We need to monitor it through these 5 files. If after these 5 files, we realize that your quality is good enough to work on the live production, we will onboard you there. And yes, exactly, more than 5 is unacceptable, and you will be removed from the project if you complete more than 5 files. Just 5, yes. And also, after we confirm the quality, we will move you to production annotation. And if your scores are low, we will remove you, and we will need to retrain you and discuss all the questions that you have that caused the low scores in your annotations, okay? Whenever you have no files in the platform, please let us know. because ideally you should have files in your annotation queue. But in case you don't, please don't hesitate to email us through annotation@etf.com. And one more thing that I wanted you to take into account. Please note that we have, apart from guidelines attached here, we also have FAQ spreadsheet attached in the guidelines, attached in the UI. So anytime you have a question, you can go to this spreadsheet. First of all, make sure that your question has not already been answered in there. We have a feedback session there, feedback tab. Let me actually share it for your visibility. So we have questions here. We have feedback section. So always make sure that maybe your question has already been answered. Make sure not to ask the same question, okay? If it's been answered, you can refer to that question. And we have common issue examples here that you can refer to to make sure that you don't make the same or similar errors while doing the annotation. All of this is attached in the UI, and any questions that you have, you can address there. That's it for now. Yes, once you complete the 5 files, stop the work. We will get back to you regarding the next steps. And please take into account that we may not get back to you right away because it takes time for us to review all the files annotated by all users. So once we have the information, we get back to you with the update, right? So it may take a couple of days, but the sooner you complete, probably the sooner we'll get back to you. That is it for now. Thanks for joining the call. Thanks for taking the time. Please wait for updates from our end. The next step is going to be us sending this recording to you and onboarding you to the platform to complete 5 files in annotation. If anything is unclear, please let me know. Otherwise, thanks again, and we'll be in touch. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much, Suna.
Thank you, Carlos. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.